Hello, Delaware State Hornet family. My name is Dakota Bowden, and it is my great honor to welcome you to the second episode of Beyond the Lecture podcast. Sitting in with us today and with Professor Yah Williams, Charles Madden. Mr. Madden is a seasoned individual in the work field with lots of experience from holding senior management roles in both nonprofit and government sectors, where he was responsible for resource development, strategic planning, and project management and external relations. With a resume as impressive as Mr. Madden, it comes to no surprise that he has served as Newcastle County's Chief Executive for Community Impact, Executive Director for Wilmington's Hope Commission, to more recently serving as the Vice President for the Strategic Partnerships and Corporate Affairs for some of Delaware's largest nonprofits. Madden also earned a bachelor's degree in behavioral science and a master's degree in human resource. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for an amazing episode ahead of you. You don't want to miss it. Without further ado, sitting with Professor Yah Williams, Charles Madden.
So we are so excited to have our guest for Beyond the Lecture podcast here today. You heard a little bit about him from his bio and introduction, Mr. Charles Madden, and I just wanted to thank you for being here with us on today.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to go ahead and get right in. I know we heard about your bio, but I want for you to share a little bit about your background and how you have come to sit in your current seat or role.
So it's probably a question that should be easy for me to answer, and I'll do my level best to make it relate. But so I am currently the Director of Existing Business Engagement and Talent. So I work for a firm who's responsible for bringing companies to Delaware and supporting companies who are already here. But I've had sort of I call it circuitous background. So I started out, I went to HBCU in Florida. I joined the military. I worked at Del Tech. I worked at MBNA, which was formerly a credit card company that was bought by Bank of America, the building we're sitting in. And I went to law school. So I did a little bit of law for a little bit. I did some consulting work, and most of those times I've had some interaction with workforce in many of those roles, sort of helping people find jobs, get jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And then I heard about this opportunity. I talked to the current CEO about it. It's something I had never really done before, not specifically, and it sounded like a good opportunity, and I've been doing it for like 5 years now, and had a lot of opportunities to grow, met a lot of different companies, learned about a lot of fascinating things that are being done here in Delaware that I would have otherwise not known about. So it's been a great ride for me.
Awesome. I love that your trajectory wasn't just one path, one way. And I really would love to kind of talk about your current role and just tell us about Delaware Prosperity Partners.
Yeah, so the Delaware Prosperity Partnership, we call it DPP for short, is the creation of the current government, in fact. So the work that we do was formerly done by a state agency. Now we're a private firm that works with both the public sector and the private sector to, again, drive business in Delaware. Specifically, me and my colleagues are talking to companies in many cases all over the world about the possibility of either opening a business here or expanding their business here in Delaware. And then I spend a fair amount of my time talking to companies who are already here. So in that role, my job is to go out and talk to existing companies that kind of fall in 5 industries, and just to see how they're doing from a business perspective. We want people and companies in Delaware to feel like they can thrive. And so my job is to check in and see how those companies are doing. In some cases, they're doing great. In some cases, they're not doing so great. So I serve as sort of a consultant to help them with any challenges they may have or opportunities they see to grow their business. And then part of that is, as you guys probably know, it should be good news for you, is many companies are looking for talent. So I spend a fair amount of my time talking to companies about their talent needs and what their pipeline looks like in terms of the types of talent they're looking for. So I have a really great job in terms of just understanding how business works, but also trying to work with businesses to find out what their needs and what some of their challenges are.
Awesome. So you talked a little bit about businesses. Some of them are doing great and some of them aren't. So can you define what that looks like from a doing good and not doing not so good from a business lens so that our students will know and understand what that means?
Yeah, so it's really nuanced in terms of how businesses are operating. But for us in a broad sense, as an organization, we're judged based on how many jobs we're able to bring to Delaware. So as our report card each year is really based on a couple of things. It's how many new jobs are created as a result of business we brought in, and then how much money do those businesses spend on capital expenditures like buildings and equipment, things of that nature. So each year we have a goal of how many jobs we're trying to create and how much capital expenditures or investments in Delaware we're trying to make. So when I go out and talk to companies, a great visit is, hey, we're hiring and we're looking to bring new people into the company, or we're going to build a new facility, or we're buying new equipment. Those are the kinds of things that make it a great visit. And when companies are doing that, obviously they're doing well if they're thinking about that, or if they're thinking about expanding. So maybe they're in Newcastle County, they want to expand to, Kent County or some other place in the state. So those are what I'd call sort of good visits.
Okay.
There are situations where companies are going the other direction. So maybe they are not able to meet, they're not, in a sense, have the same amount of business that they once had. Or they may be laying people off, or they may be reducing their staff. Those are the things that I would consider to say are tough visits. Doesn't mean that we can't help them, though, because sometimes there are solutions we can bring to bear for a company they may not even know existed that could help them recover. So each visit is different. Each industry is different. But in broad strokes, it's really around the number of people they're hiring or people they're bringing in and the equipment and things like that.
Awesome. So essentially, how they're building the economic area and economic development and things from that perspective. Yes. So as we shift into that, can you discuss a recent project or initiative that you believe successfully contributed to the economic development within Delaware or within a specific county or region?
Yeah, so I'm going to try that in a very broad way, and then I'll sort of get more specific. But for me and for us, the opportunity to talk to companies is a great thing, right? So the ability to go into somebody's company and understand how things are going is really broad-based understanding for us and things in terms of how the environment in Delaware is from a business standpoint. And so I get to learn a lot. Like some things that are made here, I would never in my wildest dreams thought were made right here in Delaware. Or some of the things that people are doing here in Delaware, I'm amazed by that because I've been here a long time and didn't realize that some of these things are actually being done right here in Delaware. But a project, and I've worked a lot of different projects. We call them projects. So I worked a lot of different projects, but one that kind of sticks out to me is, I actually going to say two of them, but one of them was a smallish company. So they had about 30 employees. They do professional labeling or for dairy products. So if you go into, let's call it Acme, and you buy the generic milk, well, there's some company that's making that milk for Acme. So I work with a company who does that kind of, they do the product and put the store brand label on it, if you will. And so they were challenged because the equipment that they were using was dated. And their competition is in the region. So they were really competing with other dairies across the, sort of, I would call it the mid-Atlantic. So Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Jersey is their competition. And so if they were not able to upgrade their equipment, they just couldn't buy for contracts with some of these national brands like Wegmans and Sprout, places like that, Trader Joe's. And so after a couple of years of working with this company and trying to figure out how we can get them to be more competitive again, it happened to be a woman-owned company, and a woman who had started as an intern, and she just kind of worked her way up to the president. So it was just a really amazing story from somebody who started in college as an intern, and eventually, some 10, 15 years later, did well in the company and was able to buy a big portion of the company. So we were able to help her and her company become more modernized in terms of their equipment and giving them an ability to sort of work in, these big spaces with the bigger companies like that, that want these lots of volume of milk and dairy products. So that was one. And I'll do this one a little quicker because this one is more closer to here. Actually, it's just, I guess, south of Smyrna. And they do frozen, I'm talking about food a lot, right? But they do frozen products like peas and things you buy at the grocery store. And so this particular company has been around for 100 years this year.
Oh, wow.
So they started in 1924. They're celebrating their 100 years this year. And it's a family-owned company. I think it's like fifth generation. And they work with a lot of farmers in the area to provide their products that then they sell to grocery stores and things of that nature. And so, again, they had some challenges around not just their equipment, but their facility is pretty old because the place that they're located, it's probably 100 years old too. I mean, in terms of what, the conditions of the facility. So We work really closely with them to try and help them upgrade their facilities and their equipment. Again, helps them make more competitive. So for us, our competition is the surrounding states. We don't want business to go outside the state of Delaware, at least unless they're expanding. But a big part of our work is to make sure that our companies feel like they're supported. And that comes in a lot of different ways. So if I ask each one of you how we'd be supported, I'd probably get as many people, I'd get that many different answers. So each business is a unique opportunity to understand about what they're doing, how they do it, and how we can support them, and how we can partner with them.
Awesome. So what do you think the biggest challenges currently that businesses or nonprofit organizations in your sector or in Delaware are facing? And the second part of that is, how can emerging leaders in the field begin to address those issues?
Yeah, so when I walked in the room today, I was like, wow, it's just a lot of energy, good young energy in the room. And I'm impressed by that because when I go into companies, the number one thing I hear, it doesn't matter the company. So I talked about these industries that we work in, and they're what we call growth industries, right? So it's food and agriculture. So you heard me talk a little bit about that. We do business and finance. We do science and technology, education and healthcare, and then manufacturing and logistics. So those 5 industries are the types of companies I would go see. So I wouldn't see any company necessarily that falls outside of those industries. But if you think about those in their totality, it reaches all kinds of disciplines in terms of what kind of talent they need. And it doesn't matter where I go, talent is the number one challenge for most companies. So finding people who obviously have a skill set, and then people who are willing to show up every day and have the discipline to, complete the job and do it well. And that's a real difficult solution for us to come up with because we can't manufacture talent, right? So, some of the other things we can help with, and they're fairly easy to deal with. But when it comes to helping companies identify talent who, again, has skills, has the attitude that wants to show up and work every day, and is committed to being good. Because most places I've been at, no matter the industry, we'll show you or we'll work with you on how they want the thing done, right? Yeah. But you've got to be willing to come in every day and care about and take pride in the work you're doing. And to me, that's been the biggest challenge. One might think that, finance is an issue, and that is for many companies. Finances can be an issue, but there can be solutions, easier solutions for financing. It's hard to produce talent. Talent just doesn't grow on trees in a sense, right? They say money doesn't grow on trees, but neither does talent. So the biggest challenge I've seen is really talent that's committed, right? So it's not that I just have a skill, it's that I have a skill that I'm willing to display and do my best every day to be better. Yeah.
Awesome. So I think with that, shameless plug, they can always come to Delaware State University here in the College of Business because we're cultivating the best and the brightest who has that talent. Yeah. But I think to that point, in your opinion or just being in the field, do you think that it is specific to the area because people aren't staying in the area to cultivate the talent, or it's more that there's a lack of interest or, pay? So I know that they aren't as committed. Is that a area thing, or do you think that is lack of training and resources?
So it could be all of those things and more. And I don't know if I can talk to the audience a bit, but
you can.
My sense is some of you come from all over the region to come to Delaware State, fair? How many native Delawareans in the audience? Yeah, so less than half, right? Maybe a quarter of the room aren't Delaware residents, right? So I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I went to an HBCU in Miami, Florida. So I was a long ways from home, and I had no intention of going back home, right? So when you get your first chance away to be from home, you go to a place like me, Miami, Florida, like, no way I'm going back to Detroit, Michigan, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, we probably don't have time to go into where everybody's from, but my sense is you've come to a place either to go to school or because you liked it, right? Mm-hmm. What we find, and this is not just at Delaware State, but just in general, is that most talent comes here to go to our universities and schools and then go back. Either they go back home or they go somewhere else. So we have more people going out than coming in. And so the challenge is to get people to stay, right? So let's assume everybody in this room is talented. They're going to meet all the needs that companies have, most of you, even if you had a job here, would probably say, but I wanted to go back home, or I wanted to go somewhere else. And so the draw for us, and part of my job when I first took on this role, was to really work with our higher institutions and our workforce training programs to get people to stay. Not sure I was incredibly successful with that, but there's all these different programs like Dr. Kaysen. We work with some Delta State students to get internships, because one of the things I learned in this role is I had never heard of economic development before. I never knew that people actually got jobs doing what I do. And so I think when we were able to work with Delaware State to get some students in, they could see that this is a pretty cool thing to do, right? And I didn't know that. And I've had some really cool jobs. I was a lawyer for a little bit. I've done a lot of really cool things. None as cool as this, because I get to do what I like to do. One is understand business. Like, I'm around business all the time, around people who started business, created business, and run businesses. But then I also get to help people. So it's like the two things I really like about all the things I've done in my life is helping people and learning about business. And this sort of combines both of those loves, but in different ways.
Yeah. That's awesome that you can see that you get to infuse that. And I agree. It wasn't until I worked closely as an undergrad student. I majored in business. We understood a little bit about what economic development was, but you don't look at it from the lens of the type of job and type of work that you get to do and helping people and all of those things. So from your experience in totality, how do you envision the future of working to kind of help impact those local economies and community and things like that?
That's a really hard question. So I am a relative puppy in this industry, right? So I've been doing this for 5 years. And the better part of the earlier part of my career in this space was really around talent, right? But the sort of interactions with businesses from a pure business perspective, I'm fairly new, but it's not all that complicated to understand it once you sort of engross yourself in it. The challenges is, I think, what you asked me, right? So I'm going to stick with the talent, right? Because that's what I hear most from people who do business every day. I think talent is a challenge. I think the other thing is, at least I'm going to speak to this audience, and that is those of you who even know what economic development is before we start having this conversation. And if I ask any one of you, like, what would, if you pursue something in economic development, what would that look like, right? And so I'm not sure you would know that, because I certainly in undergrad didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
And when I thought about business, I thought about, I'm going to open a business, right? Or, I never thought about it from the perspective, there's so many different ways I can function in this space and not necessarily be an entrepreneur and not necessarily run a business, right? And so for me, I got into the business because a lot of my background was in workforce and talent.
Yeah.
And that's an important part of business, right? Because business can't be successful if they don't have good people. And so I was able to sort of translate that into really working with companies and helping them with their other challenges, right? And now I find myself as I think of us more as consultants. So companies tell us about what's going on. I work with my colleagues in the office. We try to come up with solutions. I never think I have to have an immediate solution. So if I talk to a company today, I'm not feeling like I got to have a solution for them right away.
Yeah.
I feel like I got to go talk to some people who faced these issues before, or who might think about it differently, right? So this is going to be my answer to your question. That is, thinking about it differently, right? So the people who've done this think about it the same way most of the time. Most of you guys will bring a fresh set of eyes, a fresh set of experiences, a fresh way of thinking about things, right? If we've done it this way all the time, more than likely we're going to keep doing it that way. But when you bring in new talent and diverse talent and people from diverse backgrounds, we may come up with a better solution because we think about it very differently. And I find that to be true in no matter what I've done, no matter what career I've been involved with. If you start opening your mind up to thinking about how other people might think about it or allowing other people to weigh in, you come up with almost 100% of the time, you come up with better solutions, almost all the time. So the challenge is diversity.
Yeah.
But in that, exposing our students, Black and brown people, to the opportunities that they would otherwise not be exposed to. Because I've gone on conferences all over the country where people who are economic developments, and Dr. Kaysen has done the same, and there's few people who look like us. And that's not a knock on it, but that's just the reality.
Yeah.
For me, it's just that I didn't know it existed, right? And so now you guys are in a space where you know something exists that really has endless opportunities across a lot of different things, right? So you could be somebody who's an accountant, you could be somebody who is an HR person. I mean, there's all those different things within the discipline that could be a launching pad for you in a space that I think is ripe for growing. And you bring diversity and youthful energy.
Yes. As I'm thinking as you're talking and exposing our black and brown students and just individuals in general to economic development, what ways outside of, because everybody can't be here in this classroom and see the podcast and things like that, what are some things that our students or people that are interested in economic development from a working in that space or learning more about that space, what would be some tangible things that you think that they could begin doing?
Yeah. So that's really the question. I'm not sure my answer is going to be specific to economic development. It's been specific to my career and specific to what I think people I've seen be successful. And so one of the sort of early bits of advice I got was find something you like doing, work hard at it, and everything else will take care of itself, right? So that would be my first bit of general advice, right? But in terms of this space and where there are opportunities. As I said before, today's world, the biggest challenge has consistently been talent, right? So if you have any background or interest in creating ways or pathways for people to understand and grow their sort of, I'll call it toolkit, right? If that's something you like, then that's something across any industry, you're going to have an opportunity to do that. What have I seen that I have been impressed with in the spaces I've been around with respect to economic development? So think about our work is we work with companies. So it's either a company who is somewhere else and wants to come here. So we've got to make them feel good about coming to Delaware. Why would I want to come to Delaware? Like, how can you sell me on the idea of coming to Delaware versus going to Maryland or some other place, right? So you got to be able to communicate with people and negotiate in a way that they derive a comfort from you, because a lot of business is on relationships, right? Facts are important, but they don't need to talk to you about facts because they can go on the internet and find the facts, right? The data is going to be there, right? It's not hard to find the data.
Yeah.
I think the thing that a valuable skill set, not just in this space, but in almost any space you're in, is the ability to talk to people, right? So I was thinking about this today because I was at this leadership event earlier today at Goldie Beacon, as a matter of fact. And one of the things that, as I've gotten a little older, right, I'm amazed at how this generation interacts with each other, right? It's like on the phone, so it's not like this kind of interaction, right? And when you're dealing with, in the spaces I'm in, that's not how they interact, right? Only recently have people started to interact through Zoom, right? Because it's more convenient. But those deals and those real conversations come from, I develop a relationship with you, I trust you, right? I think that you have something to offer me and you can articulate that to me, and I feel comfortable taking the leap, right? So obviously those communication skills and ability to sort of relate to different people in different spaces, which goes back to diversity, right?
Yes.
You guys seen a lot, you experience a lot. The experiences that you're having here are very transferable, right? So when you come into a space where you got people from the East Coast, the West Coast, from South, the North, like that ability to interact with people who come from different walks of life is transferable, and you really have to sell that and sort of nurture that while you're in this space. So I don't know if I answered the question. But
No, you did. I think that was very good and very valuable information for our students to walk away with, not just for this space, but like you said, to any space that they're in, just making sure that they hone in on those skills. Two more questions for you, and then I will allow for our students to have an opportunity to ask questions and all of that. So what has been, I know that this was a space that you weren't in before and you've had some great success and fun jobs and cool things, but what has been your proudest moment in your career related to this space or this environment?
Oh, wow. So, yeah. I've had a lot of, I feel very fortunate to have had the many opportunities I've had throughout my career. And I think it's important for me to share this with you. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, very humble circumstances, incredibly humble circumstances. Did not think that I would ever go to college. Did not think I would leave Detroit in many respects because there just wasn't enough people around me who I could see had done it, right? So I'm a firm believer in it's hard to be something you can't see, right?
Yeah.
And so why I mentioned earlier the energy in this room, it's like I like to come in a room where it's people that I can relate to. At least I can't relate to by age, but experiences in some respects I can. And so one of my sort of, I guess, there have been many proud moments for me in terms of my career. But in economic development, I think what has been proud for me, this is probably a bit personal. So some of the things that when I came into it, because I had no background in it, you lack a little confidence, because confidence comes from having success in that thing, right?
Yeah.
And I had no success specifically in this thing, but I had a lot of confidence in me from previous jobs and its successes. And so I didn't know when I get in sort of these big audiences in these big rooms, having not had the experience, to know whether I could cut the mustard, so to say, or if I could, step my game up to be able to, compete in these spaces. And, I'd gone to a couple of different conferences in the States here and interacted with people who had been doing this for years, right? This is probably all they ever done. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, yeah, I could do this, right? So, because I drew upon my other experiences doing other things. So everything you're doing, even today, will help you in spaces that you may feel unfamiliar at, right? So a lot of us, I think we have to bring a certain level of confidence to a space. And for whatever reason, I've always had that, right? So I've always been able to be in spaces and felt like, hey, if this person can do it, I can do it, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't have a lot of experiences specifically to this discipline, but I had experiences on athletic field, in classrooms, in other jobs, and my ability to relate to people and to be able to communicate served me well in this space, because this is a lot of communication. It's like I talk to people who run companies. I talk to people who need help running those companies. I talk to people who work in those companies. And so the ability to talk to people, relate, be sincere, follow up, right? Be timely. Those are things you already know, right? You just gotta do it, right? It's not just the one thing to know. I always say, they say knowledge is power. I say the application of knowledge is really the powerful thing, but
that's good.
That's what I would say, yeah.
That's good. You dropped a lot of tidbits and gems there, and I think that one of the things that I would love to echo that you said was, like your experiences with you, right? You draw on the experience of who you are and your own track record, the confidence that you had in those other spaces and your own track record. So when you go into a new space, you can kind of diminish that fear or whatever that is, because you know that you are bringing and you're drawing on that. So I think that was very powerful and very good. My last question is, you've talked to them about talent, what they need to do. If you was to give them one last piece of advice that may not be specific to economic development, but if you need them to know one specific thing, what would that be?
I'm almost, as you were asking the question, I'm certainly listening to understand the question, but I almost feel like I'm not qualified to answer that question, right? Like what piece of advice I would give you, because everybody's situation, everybody's sort of life circumstances is very different. For me, that advice would be this, but it's not one thing. So I didn't just arrive here to say this today. This has sort of been something I've worked on either consciously or subconsciously all my life, and that is to believe I belong, right? I'm not going in a room, or I've never been in a room where I felt like I shouldn't be there, right? And I think there will be times in your life where people will want you to believe that you shouldn't be there, right? And I don't ever go in a room, even if I internally feel that way, I'm not going to externally let it be feeling that I don't feel like I should be there. So there's probably a level of confidence there that even borderlines cocky going into a space, because I was talking to somebody over the last couple of days about various challenges, and I'm very comfortable saying this, whether it's on YouTube or for the organization. Maybe this shouldn't necessarily represent the organization I work for, but that when you are a minority, it's fair to say, and data shows as much, you're going to have to work a little harder, right?
Yeah.
But I just don't think you can use that as an excuse, right? You know that going in, right? So just work a little harder, right? And I found that to be the best advice that I have, because I recognize going in them spaces, sometimes I'm not welcome. Sometimes it's like, well, I'm here because I'm black or whatever that might be.
Yeah.
But I get a chance to show up and show out, right? And I'm always representing me, right? At the end of the day, I don't want to go into a space and misrepresent myself. and not put the best foot forward for me, because every space I've been in created another opportunity for me in the next space.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah.
That was great. That was great. Thank you so
Thank you.
much for sharing your valuable knowledge, experience, and all of that with our viewers, with our students, and just helping us go beyond the lecture. At this time, I'm going to open it up for our students to ask you any questions that they may have. And it looks like we already have some hands popping up. So if you would stand up, share.
If y'all ask questions, I'm gonna feel like I was a failure. So
Share your name, your classification, and what your question is, and then we'll go to you next.
Well, hi, first of all, my name is Dakota. I'm a marketing management major here at Delaware State. I must say it was an honor to introduce you to the class and to the Beyond the Lecture podcast. Throughout your conversation with Professor Williams, you conversated a lot about how you are cultivating economic development within communities, and you're bringing people together, and you're moving the next generation to the next biggest thing. But one of the things I was constantly thinking about as you were conversing with the professor was, what self-reflection do you have within yourself? So I guess in a better sense to say, if you were to go back to your younger youthful days and you were to look at that younger child who was Charles Madden before he was Charles Madden, what advice or what would you say to that kid that would look up to you today?
So I'm going to answer that question, but I want to just acknowledge something about you. So very well spoken, and that's a skill set that I think I was trying to articulate earlier. That skill, your ability to stand up and talk, is very transferable in any space, right? So much respect for that, right? What would I tell my younger self? That's not something I've ever really thought about, right? And so I'm going to interject something that is, again, a bit personal, but maybe it's transferable to sort of my business world. So I have two kids, 10 and 12. And I think about when I am in conversation with them, what opportunities am I creating for them? So they would be, if I'm talking to my younger self, it's probably how I talk to my kids at this point. And it's really my kids are in a very much more enviable position I was growing up, right? So they don't want for much.
Yeah.
And so what I try to instill in my younger versions of me is my kids is to take nothing for granted, right? To take nothing and no one for granted. And so today you're in a space where it seems like I come to class or I'm at Delaware State, right? Don't take the opportunity that you have here for granted, because in a short period of time you won't be here. And the most fondest memories I have is being at an HBCU, right? So I've been to HBCUs and PWICs, and I would tell you what's shaped me more than anything else in my experience at HBCU. So my younger self, or if I was talking to my younger self, I would have really taken in the experience at Florida Memorial that I didn't take in, right, when I was there. I took for granted, hell, I'm here, I should be here, right? Mm-hmm. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But, and the other piece that I would say, and this is probably maybe more tangible for you guys today, is you have to build relationships, right? You have to value relationships. And I almost think that it's important to tell you, you have to compartmentalize those relationships. Not every relationship is meant for everything, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to understand what relationships get you where you want to go in a particular moment, right? And I don't mean that you have to look at relationships as transactional, right? Because some relationships are transactional, right? Yeah. They really are, and it's okay. But some of them are relational. And you've got to define which ones are, both from your personal dealings and your professional dealings, right? Because I have, and many people would say, they don't really have personal relationships in their professional dealings. I would advise against that personally, right? Because I think that when I've had personal relationships in my professional business, those people looked out for me differently. Yeah. Whether I work with them or they work for me. They work harder when they have that personal relationship with you. They will go the extra mile when they have that personal relationship with you. So those would be my advice to my younger self, is to not take anything for granted and to understand the value of relationships and how I use the word compartmentalize them, but yeah, I try to compartmentalize them.
That was really good. Thank you. All right, I think Ryan.
My name is Ryan Jones. I'm also a marketing major as well as computer.
Where are you from, Ryan?
I'm from originally from Philadelphia, but I live here in Delaware.
Okay.
So you talked about believing you belong. So and you also talked about living into your mission. So you understand. Some people may not understand what that looks like. So are there any mentorship opportunities that are available in the Delaware Prosperity Project?
So that's a really good question, and one that I've grappled with over the course of my career, because I always felt like I have a responsibility to give back to people who need help or need support. I think the challenge, I've stopped using the word mentorship, although that's a word that's sort of common in the lexicon. People talk about it. I like the word advisor. It doesn't feel as, the commitment seems a little different when you talk about advisor. So I would encourage you to think about how I can identify advisors, because I can have multiple advisors across different things that are important to me. So go back to your question, because I may not have really answered your question, so please give it to me again.
Honestly, kind of did in a sense. I was just talking about how like specifically in the Delaware Prosperity Project, we talk about looking for talent. So like, is there like a way to seek out talent? Yeah. In terms of mentorship.
So I'll give an example, because this summer we had Darius. Anybody know Darius? Elliot? No. So he's a student here. So he interned at DPP. We're small, so we're not a big company. I think there's 13 of us, so we're not huge, so we don't get a lot of interns. At one point we started, I think we had 3 interns from Delaware State, which is probably more work than we had for them. But Darius was with us this summer. I wanted to make sure he got a good experience. I did, because I've been in situations where I was an intern and I just felt like I was just a body, right? And really, I think from an internship, you need to understand how to navigate the workplace, right? Like the X's and O's are important, but navigating the workplace when you're young is really important, right? So I wanted to make sure that not only did Darius understand how to navigate the workplace, but to then take him to some of these business meetings with me so he can understand that it's not as intimidating as it might sound, right? So, we went to a Fortune 500 company, and I said, Darius, it's your show, buddy. So, I introduced myself, talked about what we're there for, but I said, hey, man, take over. And I knew he could handle it, right? Because he had demonstrated to me throughout the summer that he can go into a space and talk to people. And that's really what my business is, talking to people. And he did a wonderful job. And I looked up, and him and the creator of this company, and it's a really fascinating company, that they were having just a real good conversation. And the actually guy who started this company is from Philadelphia. But him and Darius hit it off. And it wasn't necessarily about the X's and O's of the country, or of the company, right? It wasn't the details, because it's like a biopharma. Like, they do really sophisticated stuff, chemicals and that kind of thing. Like, I don't know stuff about that, right? But relating to him was more important than talking about how the sausage was made, right? So surround yourself with people who you can talk to that will challenge you in ways that make you uncomfortable.
That's good. Thank you. Yes. Okay.
My name is Kirsten Buckwalter. I'm a business analytics major, and I was wondering if you could go a little bit more in depth about the consulting side of your job and like how you would like help these companies in the way.
So where are you from?
Reading, Pennsylvania.
Reading. Okay. How far away is that?
About 3 hours.
How'd you find Del State?
The equestrian team.
Oh, okay. So I took us off course for a second there, but
No, you're good.
so the question was, what is the consultant like? What are some of the specifics? So it's hard to give a single answer to that, because if you think about the 5 industries that I talked about, we focus on, they all have very different types of needs, right? And so it's really unique to the company situation, right? So the best way I would describe it is they have a problem or they have a challenge. Let me rephrase that. They have a challenge, and they have up to this point not figured out how to address that challenge. And so if they're willing to share that challenge with me, we talk through it, right? And mostly in the initial conversations, I'm just trying to understand what the challenge is, right? Where it originates from, how much do you know about the challenge? What would you like to be different, right? So just some basic things that if you were talking to your friend who came to you with this challenge, how would you talk them through it? Same thing here, right? That's what I'm saying. Everything is transferable, right? So don't think that you're not learning how to do this in your everyday interactions, right? And so then I would go back to a bigger team, right? And I say, I talked to company X, here's what I heard. Now, in almost all of these times, I actually need to go into the company, right? Because sometimes you can learn a lot from just walking in the door, right? And you learn even more from talking to the people who aren't the leaders, right? Or just watching how they talk to the leader or how they interact with their coworkers. And so a lot of times I learn a lot from what's not even being said, right? And so sometimes I can walk in a place, and I'm not saying I have some special power, right? Because I could be wrong in cases too. And I can tell if they can be helped, right? Some people want to be helped, but can't be helped, right? And I assess that too as part of the conversation, but I try my level best, and then if I can't help, I solicit help from others to try and do so. But the consulting work is really just trying to fact find and find solutions, right? And be honest about the fact that sometimes there are solutions and sometimes they're not, right? And that's why I said earlier about diversity. So I come to a room, and if I ask you guys to help me solve a problem, I'm gonna get a multitude of possibilities, right? But if I keep it to myself or there's no diversity in my thinking, I'm not gonna really explore all the possibilities that might help a company. So my consulting role, or the consulting role, is fact finding and looking for solutions, right? And we have created solutions that are general, right? So I might use the same solution or the same type of solution for 6 different companies because it's broad reaching in terms of that solution, right?
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question.
Good afternoon. My name is Zoe Jenkins, and I'm a freshman at Delaware State University, majoring in business management.
Where are you from, Zoe?
I'm just from Delaware.
Not just from Delaware, you're from Delaware. Say it with your chest out.
And so you talked about how you grew up in Detroit, Michigan. You traveled all the way across the country to graduate at a HBCU in Florida. Then you went to the military, and then you went to law school. But how did you specifically discover your talent for business?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I imagine Dr. Kaysen and Dr. Williams, when they went to college, probably had different visions on what they were going to be doing by the time they left college. And many of you will probably have the same type of experience. So I knew from like very, very young that I wanted to be a lawyer. Like I did. Because I used to watch, you guys won't know this, but you can Google it. There was a show called LA Law. And Blair Underwood was an attorney on the show. And he was out in LA. And I was like, that's the life I want to know. Like LA, yeah. So I thought that was going to be my life, right? And so, life happens, life lifed. And I went to law school later on. So I had worked a couple jobs, been in profession for a little bit before I went to law school. Went to law school, and it was nothing like what I saw in LA Law. But by this time, I had a little more experience and knew that it wasn't going to be exactly that way, but it wasn't for me, right? So I pivoted because I had a set of skills as a result of that experience that were transferable. And that's what I'm trying to emphasize to this room today. You have a set of skills that if you utilize them and think about it with some confidence, they're all transferable. So I'm not sure I answered your question as I probably get off on the tangent a little bit, but yeah, I just believe in me, right? And I want everybody in this room to walk out of here saying, I believe in me and in you as an individual, right? Not just Charles, but in you.
Yeah.
Because you got a set of skills and, oh my goodness, like yeah. I like this space, so I'm just impressed. I love this space. I don't like it, I love it.
Thank you. Well, we want to thank you again for being our guest today and helping us go beyond the lecture, giving our students the overview and understanding of economic development, what you do, but also, more importantly, that they walk away believing in who they are and having the confidence to invade any space and really do anything that they set their mind to. So we thank you for being our guest and being here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to Beyond the Lecture. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration to take your business knowledge to the next level. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries, stay curious, and remember, the learning never stops when you're going beyond the lecture.